So the afternoon session includes 5 talks, and the first one is one that I'm very excited to introduce, and that's Mark Dant. I actually met Mark first on a taxi ride in San Francisco when we were both going to the same meeting, and we got put on the same shuttle. And he told me his story then, and I've kind of been hooked ever since. Mark started the Ryan Foundation, which he's gonna tell us a whole lot about. He is he was formerly the CEO and executive director of the National NPS Society, and he's going to tell us his story in working with NPS 1, and it's something that, as a laboratory person, I'm not fortunate enough to see families and get to work with families as much as some of you are. This really adds the personal component of all those samples that I help process, and reminds me that there's a person attached to them. So please help me introduce Mark Dant.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone, for allowing us to tell what we hope to be a story that actually interests each of you, because the game that you're in is not about, to me, it's not about science, believe it or not. It's not about anything other than the family. So the following story is based on a true story. First thing I have to ask is, when someone talks about relating your personal story to someone else, you have to have something in common. So let me ask the audience participation portion, how many here are married? Let's raise your hands. Okay. How many have been married for longer than 20 years? And how many have been married for less than 5 years? Okay. So it's always interesting to me is when I ask that same question, it's the ones who have been married longer than 20 years are like this. But there are 2 in the back when I said, how many have been married for less than 5 years? What happens? It's still the same. So of those that are married, let me ask, how many would have the courage to do this? Oops. Push a button, nothing happens. How many would have the courage to do that? See, I've already broken it. I did break it. Ah, there you go. Oops. Oh, there we go. You couldn't hear her because she's not on mic, but she said you have to be smarter than the remote. So, how many would have the courage to find your wedding picture and show it to an audience? A couple. Nice. Nicely done. Which is usually nobody raises their hand, because this was taken a long time ago. My wife and I actually met in high school, believe it or not. And you can tell we were married in 10th grade. We actually got married after high school. I went to the military and served for a few years, and Jean started her college at the University of Louisville, go Cards. I would come back and forth, and when I got out of the military and went through college, Jean was still living in Louisville. My dad was in the Army, so we moved around a lot, but we landed in Louisville around the summer after 6th grade, our 6th or 7th home. I was used to moving. Jean was not. I went to Dallas after the military and finished up some college and started my career there. We knew that we would get married before she got out of college, so she would have to transfer. So I went back on a weekend, and we got married on a 4-day weekend. How many remember your rehearsal dinner and the reception after the wedding? It was a good time. Do you remember, I guarantee yours was like mine, there were toasts. Usually the father of the bride, the father of the groom, best man, maid of honor, and they all have the same exact words. To the future, you'd hold the glass up. To tomorrow, may all your dreams come true. This is what happened to this young couple. Happened to yours, because that's what it's all about, time. Having the time to experience tomorrow. your future, your dreams. So Monday morning, we packed up our car full of all of our wedding presents. And we pulled in front of 2321 Bradford, where Jean's parents lived, where Jean was still living. She was a sophomore at U of L at the time. And as we left, her parents were on the porch, and they were both crying. Because this is the first time their youngest of three left home. And when Jean got in the car, she was crying. I wasn't crying. I was excited. This was our new life. Tomorrow, future, dreams, everything was starting. We pulled down the street, and she was still crying. Now, if you know the route from Louisville to Dallas, it's about 14, 15 hours. And about halfway is Memphis. The problem is, she was still crying as we pulled into Memphis. Not a good sign for the start of tomorrow. So the next day, I had a new plan. What if we did this? What if we planned out the future, tomorrow, everything about tomorrow? So we did. Got our mind off Mom and Dad on the porch and started thinking about everything that might happen tomorrow. She would finish college, transfer to the University of North Texas. She'd get a job in IT, a burgeoning field in those days. I would get promoted, and if I did, we would buy a house. Once we bought a house, we'd get a dog. Once we got a dog, we'd have kids. Now, I came from a family of 5, so I wanted 5 kids. And Jean came from a family of 3. So she wanted 3. So we had our first big marital compromise. We decided we would have 3. So, see, that guy was smart. So 3 kids, had it all lined out. Got into Dallas. She finished college, got a job with American Airlines working in IT. I got promoted. We got a dog named Bonnie. And on April 13th, Ryan Christopher Dant was born. Tomorrow, the future, everything we had hoped for was happening. The plan in the car from Memphis to Dallas was right on target. House, dog, child. Ryan was perfect. He was perfect in the nursery. He was perfect as he grew. There were no health issues. There were no problems. He would be the big brother. And so at 3.5, we decided, well, he should learn how to play with other kids. So let's put him into a structured daycare. Daycare said we have to have a physical. Well, Ryan had all of his physicals. We'll get another one. So we got another one. And the pediatrician, a young pediatrician, Jean took him, was concerned because he said Ryan's head is too large. He said Ryan's stomach is too large. Before Jean and Ryan left the office, Dr. William Coco turned around and called Dallas Children's Hospital, spoke to Dr. Lou Weber's genetic counselor, and set an appointment for 2 weeks. Now, as I would learn over time, and as each of you know, it's impossible to get in to see a geneticist. There aren't enough. Dr. Coco pulled some strings and got us in within 2 weeks. Jean came home and told me, because I was actually working late hours that time, that Ryan may have some problems. And I said, no, he doesn't. What are the problems? Well, he has a big head. I have a big head. He has a big stomach. Big stomach. Don't worry, honey, there's nothing wrong. Look at him. He plays baseball. I could throw a ball overhand fast in the house. He'd connect. We'd play catch in the house until he broke a vase, which was no more ball in the house. There's nothing wrong with Ryan. I was so convinced of this, I didn't go back to see Dr. Weber because there's nothing wrong with Ryan. Jean went in 2 weeks. When she came back, she said, Dr. Weber said Ryan may have a genetic disorder called MPS or something like that. I said, my brother's a doctor. He would have figured something out by now. There's nothing wrong with Ryan. Doctors oftentimes forecast things that are bad just in case, you have to be alert. But don't worry about Ryan. He loves baseball. I mean, he can run. He can play. There's nothing wrong with Ryan. Now, these are the days before the internet. So there was no instant search. Any search would have to come in a library. I said, next time, he took a urine test or something. The next time when that comes back, I'll go with you. It came back pretty quickly. So Jean and Ryan and I got in the car. We drove down to Dallas Children's Hospital. We walked into the examination room, and the appointment was at 1. I told my staff, I'll be back by 2:30. Don't worry. 1:45, we're still waiting for Dr. Lou Weber and his staff to come in. So Ryan and I actually blew up an examination glove. I drew stitches on it like a baseball, and we threw it back and forth in the little examination room until the door opened. And when the door opened, Dr. Weber came in, who I'd not met. But he came in with someone else, a genetic counselor. And then he came in with another physician. And he came in with a family counselor. Now, Jean was sitting on my right, and Ryan was sitting facing her. I was sitting on her left, and the whole room was now full of people. And Dr. Weber began to speak.
What can you do if someone you love is diagnosed with a disease so hopeless and so rare, drug companies won't develop a treatment because it would never turn a profit? You might try doing what Mark Dant did. His little boy Ryan was one of only 40 babies in the United States born each year with a fatal genetic condition called mucopolysaccharidosis, or MPS1. Mark and his wife Jean were told they could do little more than wait for their boy to die. But the Dants were not willing to accept that. Ryan's father embarked on a mission with only one goal: saving Ryan.
Hi.
Ryan was born in 1988, and from what his parents could see, was growing into a healthy, active toddler. Mark was on the police force, and Jean worked in the airline industry. Together, they were building a quiet, peaceful life in the suburbs of Dallas. That is, until 1991, when Ryan turned 3, and a physician discovered his liver was abnormally large. Kids like Ryan, with mucopolysaccharidosis 1, are missing an enzyme that the body needs to break down certain waste materials. Over time, the buildup damages organs like the heart, stiffens the joints, affects breathing, and stunts growth. In some cases, it can lead to severe brain damage and mental retardation.
Severe brain damage and mental retardation. As Dr. Weber started to speak, Jean started to cry. And I started to argue. And Ryan, I have this visual in my mind, took the back of his hand and kept wiping Jean's cheeks. And he kept saying, "It's going to be okay, Mommy." And I heard that in the background as I heard Dr. Weber tell me, and Jean, Ryan would not live past the age of 10. If he did, maybe 12 or 14, he would be in a lot of pain. His limbs would draw up. His hands wouldn't be able to hold a baseball bat. And he would pass away. He may be blind or deaf. He'll be in a wheelchair. But the worst part of the story was, there's nothing you can do about it. Because Ryan has something so rare, the U.S. government calls it an orphan disease. So rare that companies can't come in and help. Scientists don't work on it because there aren't that many children in the world with MPS1. I argued with him, and finally he said, "Mr. Dant, you have to understand, your child has a disease so rare, there aren't any therapies. There's nothing you can do. Take your child home and love him. You've got 10 or 12 years." Now I remember getting in the car, and I don't remember anything else until we pulled into the driveway. And in the driveway, I heard Jean say, "What are we going to do?" Now, I was the same young dad who had driven from Louisville to Dallas with the plans of 3 to 5 children. 3. That wouldn't happen because the family counselor told us that any children we would have in the future would have a 1 in 4 chance of dying like Ryan. There was no hope. And so we started a new pattern. We'd play with Ryan when we got home. We'd fix him dinner. We'd put him in bed. And then we would sit in the living room and stare at nothing. We'd go to bed night after night. I would wake up and I would find either Jean not laying next to me, she was laying on the floor next to Ryan, listening to him breathe. Or she would wake up next to me, not being there. I was laying on the floor, waiting for Ryan to change. And he did start to change. We started hearing his breathing at night. His airway was tightening. He couldn't hold the baseball any longer. It became obvious that Dr. Weber was correct. And there was nothing we could do. So we laid there. If nothing changes, nothing changes. I started going to the library the days before the internet. I read everything I could on MPS. Most of it written by Dr. Joe Munzer at University of North Carolina, or Dr. Elizabeth Neufeld at UCLA. All of it said the same things. He's missing an enzyme. All this doctor speak. That wasn't my career. Science speak, as you know so well. I couldn't understand it, so I got a medical dictionary and sat in the library and started outlining over and over and over again. The nights or the days, whatever shift I was on, I would spend in the library. I also went to the National MPS Society's conference that first year. And there I saw children who were 3 like Ryan, and 7 and 8, and they had changed. I didn't see anyone past 14. The future was in front of us. There was no hope. There was no tomorrow. And so we got it in our mind that we would do something. I read a book on how to start a nonprofit, and we started the Ryan Foundation. But we started it very small, and if you want to start a nonprofit, I wouldn't do it this way. We started it with a bake sale that raised $342. And we put all the money in the old days. Dads used to hand out cigars at the hospital, or his friends when the child was born, and I took the leftover cigars out of Ryan's little cigar box, and that was our bank. In the bank was $342. But for some reason, getting up off the floor and doing something to change tomorrow actually felt good. You're not going to change tomorrow with $342. But we had hope. I don't know why, and I can't explain it, but we did keep going. We had other fundraisers. We had a fishing tournament, $14,000. We had golf tournaments that got bigger and bigger and bigger. We had auctions. We had other chili cook-offs. Every moment of the day, every moment of the night was spent trying to raise money. But we had no science. But for some reason, we had hope. Now, Gene working with American helped a lot because I could fly around wherever I wanted to go and visit with people to see perhaps was there a scientist who might try something for MPS 1.
Meanwhile, Ryan's health continued to decline. He began having headaches so excruciating he would vomit and pass out. His fingers started to curl. At age 7, Ryan's hands got too stiff to play his favorite sport, baseball. To keep him in the game, his father attached Velcro to his bat. Eventually, even that didn't work, and Ryan had to quit the team. Mark still worked full-time as both a cop and as Ryan's dad. Every day after walking the beat, he changed his uniform to walk another beat, knocking on doors and shaking hands,
Very nice to meet you.
raising money to give to someone,
How's it going?
anyone, working on a cure. Over 3 years, the Ryan Foundation graduated from bake sales to $100,000 golf tournaments with Ryan as their poster child.
Did I show you this? Yeah, that kind of shows Ryan's love for baseball.
We had the courage to stand up. And when I say we, it's not Gene and I. It's the community standing up for a disease they'd never heard of. But we needed science. So I read of an international symposium in Dusseldorf on lysosomal storage diseases. So I flew there. And I saw all these presenters. And one of them was named Dr. Roscoe Brady. Dr. Brady was presenting on a disease called Gaucher. Now, I knew from my reading Gaucher was an LSD, similar to Ryan's, where they were missing an enzyme in their system that broke down certain proteins. I watched as he showed all these slides of this sick little girl. And then he brought this sick little girl up on stage. She walked across the stage, and she looked happy and healthy, and she was happy. And she was so much more healthy than she would be. His process was called enzyme replacement therapy. And so after he spoke, I put my old cop hat on and started watching him walk through the crowd. I watched him as he walked through the hotel, up to his hotel room, and I waited for him. As he walked towards his room, I stopped him and said, Dr. Brady, you don't know who I am. But let me see if you'll watch this video. So in the old days, remember the old videos that were this big, cameras? So I had one of those because Ryan had played baseball not long before that. And I wanted to watch him playing for some reason. So I said, look through the viewfinder and watch this little boy. And so he watched Ryan as he rounded second and went to third, still running. And he said, he's very cute. How old is he? I said, well, he's 4, and he has MPS 1. Can you do what you did for Gaucher for MPS 1? Is it possible? We had a long conversation. He told me 3 things. 1, in a roundabout way, he said, well, how old is he? I said, well, he's 4. He said, well, you don't have enough time. And he said, it's going to take a lot of money. You don't have enough money. But he said it's possible. it is possible, but you don't have enough time and you don't have enough money. And I walked away as if I were walking on air because he said, for the first time ever, it was possible. So the next day I flew home, and in Chicago, before cell phone days, I stopped and got on my connection to Dallas. I called Gene and said, we've got great news. This doctor said it's possible. I didn't tell her this part. All we have to do is find a scientist who will do it and find a lot of money and get in a hurry. But it's possible. So shortly thereafter, we helped the National MPS Society by funding a conference in Orlando where they brought in all the children with MPS across the nation. But they also brought in scientists. And I asked specifically, can you bring in Liz Neufeld? And I remember she was the one I'd read about in the library. Everything that I'd read was Joe Munzer, Elizabeth Neufeld. And so, and that sounds like a joke, but it's not, a cop walks into a bar and meets a scientist. In Orlando, I walked into the bar, and there she was, Elizabeth Neufeld. And I asked her, is it possible to do enzyme replacement therapy like they've done for Gaucher with MPS I? And she said, not only is it possible, I have a former student who's working on it. His name's Emil Kakis. It's in a lab at UCLA, but he doesn't have any funding. Well, Ryan had stopped playing baseball. He'd stopped playing soccer. He was getting worse. The very next day, I called Dr. Kakis.
But his biggest day came in 1995 when Mark met a young scientist at UCLA named Emil Kakis. Dr. Kakis was one of the few researchers in the world studying MPS I, and his meeting with Mark Dant couldn't have come at a better time. You're almost ready to shut down?
The research was stalled, and I still held out hope that we might be able to find some angel investor to come in and give us money and make it happen, but it was very frustrating to feel that you had something that would be beneficial for a disease that wasn't currently treated and couldn't do anything about it.
So this is the lab where you actually do the research on the enzyme? Right. Dr. Kakis had a sense that this complicated disease had a fairly simple solution. Create a synthetic version of the enzyme that's missing in kids who have MPS I. This is what a normal, healthy human body does naturally?
Yes, normally your body makes these enzymes all by itself. They're helping everything run because your body is constantly building itself and breaking itself down. And one of those enzymes that's involved in that process is missing in MPS I kids. So by making it, we can help substitute for what they can't do themselves.
The science was solid, but to take his synthetic enzyme from the lab to the bedside, Dr. Kakis needed money. And Mark Dant promised to provide it because he knew that time was running out for his son, who by the age of 7 found even the simple act of breathing unbelievably difficult.
I'm getting paged again.
As Ryan fought for his life, Mark fought for money, eventually raising a total of $1 million. He gave all of it to Emil Kakis.
They basically decided to take all their money, put all their chips on one number, which was us, and hope that their number would come up, and fortunately it did.
Dr. Kakis attracted additional funding from a small biotech firm and had gotten FDA approval for a clinical trial of his synthetic enzyme treatment. 10 kids were chosen for the trial at Harbor UCLA Hospital in California. Ryan Dant was one of them.
Well, guys, I think it's time to head towards the gate.
In February of 1998, Ryan's neighbors gathered at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport for a big send-off.
When I was at the airport, when I was about to get on the plane, everybody made arch, and I went through it and went onto the plane.
All the years of knocking on doors and holding bake sales had paid off, and as they boarded the plane, the Dants finally had something to hope for. At the hospital, there remained the reality of a sick little boy.
I need a wheelchair, Mom.
Who spoke at the time about what he was getting ready to go through.
I'm a little bit scared.
He was tired of needles and doctors and feeling weaker and weaker every day.
When's this gonna end? I just want to go home because I don't like it here. I don't like to do all these tests.
What's going to happen, that enzyme's going to circulate in your blood, in your body, going all over your body and get to where it's needed to start breaking down the material that's there.
2 months before Ryan's 10th birthday, Dr. Kakis and the Dants administered the first dose of Ryan's enzyme treatment.
Okay, ready? I'll bet $10 that in 1 week you're going to feel better. No?
Ryan wouldn't take the bet, but it was a bet Dr. Kakis won. And he wasn't the only winner. Week by week, drip by drip, Ryan's life improved.
Here we go. 1, 2.
Yay! And here he is today, at age 13, back in the game. A day his parents thought they might never see.
Hey, that was a pretty good hit.
Thanks.
Before you started getting your treatment, could you hit like that?
No,
What were you like before?
I couldn't hit the ball a lot. I couldn't actually run that fast.
So you didn't have much energy.
I couldn't bend my arms back.
And you used to have headaches, your father told me.
Terrible.
How bad were they?
Really bad. As bad as you can think.
But the emotional pain often was worse.
I was just getting scared coming up to that 10 years.
So you actually knew there was a possibility before that you might die when you were 10?
Yeah.
And you thought about that? You worried about it? What'd you say to your parents?
It's gonna be okay.
And now that you're on the treatment, what's happened to all those symptoms?
Feels like I can do everything that I ever wanted to. Like go ride my bike every day or play baseball, basketball. You name it, I can do it. Except rock climbing.
Which you probably shouldn't do anyway,
Yeah.
right?
And Ryan wasn't the only one from the FDA trial to get better. All 10 kids showed improvement.
Time out.
Results so impressive they were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Thanks to the work of one visionary doctor and one determined family, these children now have something precious: time. Time to await a cure and plan for a future that many thought would never come.
Emil and I became close friends. I've never in my life seen any human being work harder than he did to do one thing, to find tomorrow. We would go out to visit him whenever we would have a fundraiser and hand him a check. And there's a great picture of, I should put it in the deck, of Ryan and I and Liz Neufeld and Emil Kakis. Our first delivery was $40,000. Not enough to fund a drug treatment, absolutely not, but enough to fund tomorrow, to get us off the floor and keep us off the floor. Emil's staff told me that a lot of the staff he hired with the foundation's funding, that you have to watch Emil when you leave at night, because the next morning he'll have the same clothes on, which means he didn't go home again. This is the work of a scientist who believed that tomorrow can be found with great science today, but it all comes back to effort. So many things changed the moment that Emil and Jean and I pushed the button to help the third child in the world to ever receive ERT for MPS I. But it wasn't just for Ryan. Ryan's story went around the world. It changed the world for children whose parents heard the exact same story that Jean and I heard. There's nothing you can do. There is no tomorrow. Stop thinking about it, because when you do, it will hurt. But we didn't stop thinking, because there were people who would help. All around the world, Reader's Digest, turns out 13 million people read the story in the Reader's Digest, and all in 10 different languages. But to me, this is the center of the world of MPS. When Jean and Ryan and I flew out to UCLA, this is what we saw. This is Emil Kakis' lab, a World War II era Quonset hut with wooden floors and nothing on the inside. His first employee, Mary Passage, a biologist, told me one time when she first got there for a week, there was nothing there but a chair with a computer on it, and an older Italian gentleman who spoke no English working on shelves in the corner, and her and Emil scrubbing the walls of the Quonset hut to prepare a lab that would develop the treatment for MPS I. The older gentleman who spoke only Italian was Emil's father-in-law, who built the shelves because he was a carpenter, and Emil wouldn't have to pay him. To save the money, dollar by dollar, to find tomorrow. We all know MPS I does not have a cure, but we knew what we were doing. We were buying time for better science, for more research, for more children to have a tomorrow. Ryan's had 12 surgeries to date, all of them correcting the damage that occurred prior to him starting on the ERT. Think of the value what newborn screening can do. If Ryan would have been diagnosed at birth, those 12 surgeries would not have occurred. His health would have changed from the moment he arrived. What would Ryan say? Ryan would say the same thing that we all have said. What Vicki said so well. These children now have something precious, time. Time to await a cure and plan for a future that many thought would never come. For years, we would not think of tomorrow because there was only pain.
I think that was good that my dad made a foundation to raise money and to help other kids to get medicine.
You have two feelings. You either have courage, you can get through it, or you take the other route that says, this is too much, I'm giving up. You can go either way. And it just seemed to us, we would take the route where we say, no, we're not going to give up. We're just going to keep working because we do that better than giving up.
Probably some of the things that I've experienced since we last filmed that's been really fun is probably getting my driver's license, graduating high school, working for the Texas Rangers in their visiting clubhouse, and then getting this great job with SMU.
I would say that he's, a 10 on a scale of 10. And there's one thing I know, you can tell Ryan to do something and he gets it done. And, there's something to be said for that, not just in the game of football, but in the game of life and in any job. And Ryan is an accountable person. He's got a smile on his face when you ask him to do something, and he wants to get it done for you.
That's how I try to live life. I don't like to tell too many people because I don't want to be treated differently. But when it's time to talk to people about it, I'll talk about it. But I just kind of keep that tiny little secret to myself because I don't want to be treated any differently than a normal person.
When we started more than 15 years ago, I met Ryan and met Mark and Jean. I had no idea where we were going to go. I had hoped we could do something for him, prevent him from declining, keep him alive. I did not know where we would go in the end.
Just being able to see how far we've come this past 15 years is amazing, because not a day goes by that I wonder what life could have been like without this medicine, what my parents' lives could have been like without this medicine, what all the people around the world's life could be without this medicine. It's just really amazing and remarkable. Be able to see all these parents from different countries send me messages on Facebook saying thank you for all the stuff you did when you were young, because without you and everyone else that was part of that trial, we wouldn't be here today.
February 13th, 2018, Ryan is now the longest treated person in the world on Aldurazyme. He has 20 years now, 20 years of treatment that would never be because there was no hope. There was no tomorrow. And not just Ryan. The amazing part is it did go around the world. And so I asked our friends at Sanofi to forward the list of where past May, Ryan graduated from the University of Louisville, where he worked for the equipment team for football, the same thing he did at SMU, where he volunteered. His dream of going to U of L occurred, and there with him was his favorite scientist, physician, who said, there is tomorrow, there is possibility. In closing, I want to look back and the lesson learned for our family. It was never the entity that made the difference. It was the individual, every single time. When we started a foundation, it was the individual who purchased things they didn't need, who donated to a disease they'd never heard of, who made a difference. They made the choice. It wasn't UCLA. It was the individual scientist who stood and said, I can make a difference with my work today. I remember where I was standing when Emil called me and said, there's a company that's going to form, and they're going to take our product, our therapy. The company was BioMarin. And when the FDA called for a second trial, and we were so worried that there wouldn't be enough funding, Emil called and said, there's a company that's going to partner, and they're Genzyme. It wasn't the company, it wasn't the entity, it was the individual. Someone within BioMarin said, let's do this. Someone within Genzyme said, let's do this. Someone at UCLA said, this is possible. Someone at the FDA said, this is possible. It was the individual. It was the empowered individual that made a difference, not the entity. All of us have within us the opportunity to find tomorrow, to change the future for those children around the world. I know where it comes from. It comes from great science and great scientists who say, I can make a difference. Because you can, you have, you will. Thank you for listening to our true story.
So I'm sure Mark would be happy to take a couple of questions if you guys have any for him.
Well, here's a question I want you to ask. Tell me about EveryLife. Our friends at Perkin-Elmer are here. BioMarin, Genzyme Ultragenics, Sanofi. All of these entities have a partnership with the EveryLife Foundation. EveryLife was founded by Emil Kakis just before he founded Ultragenics, after BioMarin. The goal is to remove the obstacles in the way of therapies for rare disease, to help those on the Hill on the Senate and in Congress to understand that the FDA are our partners. But there are some obstacles in the way that rare disease is different. That good policy can make a difference. Good policy in newborn screening can make a huge difference. The diagnostic odyssey we all talk about and hear about happens to this day in diseases that are already on the rusp. The rusp takes too long. We need to find great science to speed newborn screening so there is no such thing as a diagnostic odyssey. We know at birth this child has MPS I. Now we have some good decisions to make because there are treatments. Look at EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases online and support the difference that they can make. They've already made huge differences, and they partner with all of you in genetics because therein lies the difference in the diagnostic odyssey.